Hello. Welcome to another episode of Leadership Synergized. I'm Kevin Smith, and I appreciate you so much joining. And in the next 20 minutes, I'm so happy that you had the opportunity to meet a wonderful individual about 3 weeks ago, certainly within the last month, and it's Officer Adam Blanton. Officer Blanton, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm really happy to be on your show today.
Thank you. It's an honor, my friend and sir. And Officer Blanton is going through a transition of life in his career that we'll get into. And hopefully, and I know without question, actually, that you're going to take away some strong nuggets from leadership, from life, and just from past experiences that perhaps you can find useful in your career, in your personal life. Officer Blanton, again, thank you so much for being here. You're in the South Florida area, mid-Florida area. I'm coming to you from Indiana a bit. Our good friend Scott Orr connected us about a month ago, a little bit under a month ago.
That's right.
And what a wonderful life and career and leadership experience. I came away from our first discussion with Scott with a great deal of knowledge to help myself. Thank you. Introduce yourself a bit. Who is Adam Blanton? Where is he at right now in his career, his life? And then we'll take off from there.
All right. As Kevin mentioned, Adam Blanton, that's my name. I'm a Lieutenant Colonel in the Marine Corps. I'm currently serving in Tampa at MacDill Air Force Base with Special Operations Command, but I'm transitioning into the private sector here in the beginning of the next new year. There's a lot of turmoil and change as I get ready to do that. As I make this leap, it's interesting to watch the growth I'm going through as I try to find out who I am and what I want to be when I grow up after almost 23 years in the Marine Corps. So I do know there's certain things about myself that I enjoy building great teams and leveraging all of that experience to look at hard problems and find really unique ways to solve them. And so that's where I'm pointing myself, which is good because there's a lot of industries out there that are looking for that type of thing. I'm sure there's no shortage of folks that are going to want to jump on me at some point to help them out in there achieve their visions. I'm married 14 years now. I have 2 kids, 11 and 8, which provide their own challenges and a new way to try to lead and mentor them as they grow up, which is different than dealing with adults, at least sometimes, with things. That's who I am. We're planning on staying here in Tampa and trying to set some roots down since we haven't had a chance to do that over the past couple decades.
Lieutenant Colonel, I can unequivocally state that your leadership skills, from what I've learned about you and what you shared and what I know our listeners are going to hear this episode and then in next week's episode as well, you bring a lot of skills to a number of different industrial areas. And without question, there are going to be people interested in your skills. But before we deep dive further, perhaps there, talk a bit about the process. You mentioned transition after 23 years in the Marine Corps, in the military. Why now? Talk about that process of transition that you've been through and what have you learned through that process?
It's very interesting. It's been a long one too, because in reality, I was going to try to transition a few years ago. I hit the 20-year mark and I was ready to step off and do something different. I was getting tired, body's a little worn out. Yeah. So you're in the interest of self-preservation to a certain extent, I was ready to leave. But COVID happened and I leveraged all my networks in the civilian world to ask, hey, what's it look like out there in the civilian world right now? Almost everyone came back and said, do not leave the military at the moment. And at that time, I also got lucky and was selected to go to another military school. So it gave me a good reason to stay in a little bit longer. So did the school and had 2 years that I had to pay back for that. But I knew after that 2-year commitment that I was still going to make that transition out. But that gave me time. So it didn't feel like a hair trigger decision. It let me do some time to think about it. And what I learned mostly in all of this is that I'm not alone in the transition piece. I've watched my friends who were a little bit senior or made decisions earlier on in their careers make the transition too. So there was this ability for me to reach out and not only see what happened to them, but then leverage all of that experience as well. So that set me up to where I was going to go. With that, I would say that for anyone else that's in the military that's transitioning, like I'm going to do some shameless plugs here, but things that helped me out in my process. But 4 Block's a really good one, kind of for everyone in the military, 10-week-ish program, that resume writing, how to do all those things, interview skills, start building that civilian network for you. The Commit Foundation was also an outstanding organization for me, not so much in person, a lot more kind of online, but heavily focused on finding you, what you want to be when you grow up. I found that perfect with a lot of extra things that come with it, a coach, a resume coach, negotiation coaches, so that a huge network of folks that want to help you out. And then as I'm finishing up and getting closer, I'm about to wrap up my time with the Honor Foundation, more specifically for the special operations community, but I'm lucky because I'm at SOCOM right now. It's almost like a hybrid mix between the Commit and 4-Block, but with some of the most elite individuals you get to work with in terms of that. That has developed my skill set and just allowed me to leverage all that expertise as I focused my way into starting to step my feet out into the real world.
So, Lieutenant Colonel Blanton, you talked a bit about the 4-Block and the Honors Foundation. When you think back about stepping into those programs at the very beginning of your transition versus where you are now, because if I understand properly, starting next calendar year is your transition at this point, right? My question really gets to what jumps out at you as something maybe you didn't expect to have the impact it's had on you?
I think I didn't necessarily realize it, at least midway through my career, and it probably started to make sense as I got later on, but it's like the value of your network and what that is, and making sure that your network isn't your buddies in the military, because they're probably not going to lead you to that thing that you want to do in the real world. I realized that because most of my career in the Marine Corps has been as an artillery officer. And as you can imagine, there's probably not a lot of good roles for artillery officers in the United States. I think there's 2 cannons that are in a civilian use. One's in Colorado and one's in Alaska, just to help start avalanches to protect the ski slopes and things, right? But that's
okay.
Those are places that I really want to go and do. That's not where I want my career to
Not if you want to live in Tampa.
It doesn't work out that way very well. By watching my network expand, especially into the civilian sector and what those different industries are, I've watched my eyes open to where I would think that most of my peers would say, oh, I'm really good at project management because of my planning and skill set and everything. I might not necessarily want to do that. I'm watching myself start looking at commercial real estate. I'm looking at the tech industry. I'm talking to the medical field, not to be like a clinician, but hospitals are huge organizations that need strategists and planners and marketing people and logistics folks to make that thing work. I'm finding myself looking in different organizations and industries that I hadn't before, and I probably would not have done that if I didn't have all these people in my network opening my eyes to the possibilities that are out there.
You know, I love that, Lieutenant Colonel. I have found through my life, and I have fallen into this trap much more than maybe I like to admit now. As you reach certain levels of maturation, you're able to reflect back. Some of the fog is gone, and you understand why things went the way they did, ended the way they did, didn't end the way you thought they might. But you know, I think sometimes, to your point, in the value of the network, they become accountability friends, accountability partners. And sometimes we overcomplicate it as human beings and looking for that mass one answer right from the get-go. What I'm hearing you say is just the patience and the mantra of leadership, the motto of leadership, still leadership, to where sometimes just be still. You learn from those around you. You don't have to look anyplace else. Those have been there, done that. And there's still a lot of that in this world. And there's reason in just about any industry or role, whether it's military, civilian, athletics, education, government. There's people that have knowledge, that have learned things, some maybe through failure, some through success, that can really help us sort through. And I love your analogy about wanting to be what you want to be when you grow up. I kind of correlate that to my theme is, even at this age in my mid-60s, the U2 song, Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, in that regard, right? I love the network piece and the people that are just there for you in that aspect. Have you found it difficult? Have people been willing to open up and assist you more often than not?
Oh, absolutely. I think that you got to get past I think for certain, probably, I don't want to pigeonhole the different services in terms of Air Force, Marine, Army, and everything else. But I think that there's a certain culture associated with us where the Marine Corps in specifics, hey, we don't fail, we always win, we get by with less, we can, all of those types of things that kind of while you might not realize it early on in your career, by the end, especially if you're very introspective, you realize that you've been institutionalized to thinking that you don't need help. You've got to find ways to break that down and just do it and get comfortable with a cold message on LinkedIn, or picking up a phone and calling somebody, or at the networking event, just stepping out and start talking to people. I think that is one of those, and seeing that with the Honor Foundation, where you're around Green Berets and Navy SEALs and those folks who would definitely have no-fail missions, it's tough for them too, because they think, hey, their network's going to be good enough, and they got to work through that piece. And I think that's why we get into those organizations, because now we're all seeing ourselves struggle, and we see some of our weaknesses, and they don't want to. This is, I think, what's really important, is that it's not about trying to make your weaknesses stronger, but helping you also identify what your strengths are and really leveraging your strengths. Don't spend too much effort trying to fix that weakness if you don't need to. Like, where do you fit with the strengths and the things that you're good at? That's been really helpful to get past those barriers. And I know I'm still not good at it, but I'm trying. Here I am on your show doing something that's a little bit outside the comfort zone, to just, this is another opportunity, a rep and set, to work on my speaking abilities, be able to answer questions. This will have second and third order effects in terms of interviewing skills and those types of things. If I wasn't doing this, I would be sitting in my house just staring at the computer, working on my internship type stuff, and then worrying about when I got to go pick up the kid from school. So this is helpful in giving me another little tool in my kit as I move forward.
Thank you for sharing that experience, Lieutenant Colonel. What I heard you describing was the step to becoming vulnerable in that aspect, to serve others, to let them help you. And sometimes that's a major hurdle to get through.
It is. And it's also, it's interesting. This week in particular has been maybe not as good of a week in terms of my transition piece. A couple of emails back for resumes and job offers that didn't get accepted. They found another candidate, or folks aren't hiring. You have to stop and be like, what's wrong? Not do the what's wrong with me thing. You just got to send that email back and be like, hey, thanks for at least taking a look. If anything pops up, if you know anybody else that might need me, like, I would love the connection. And just working through that and not take any of it personal. Because what I've also noticed along the way is that, at least in the business world, like, if someone doesn't want you now, it doesn't mean that they won't want you later. And that gives you some flexibility, because you might not want them either, because something else passed. As long as you're kind and cordial and respectful, there's usually still a door that's open for you and doesn't get closed completely. So take the moment, don't write an angry email or write something in frustration, breathe on it, choose the right words, and make sure you keep those connections in that network warm and hot, so that something might come up where they have a windfall, where they have to grow exponentially, and they need someone just like you to slide right into there.
So, Lieutenant Colonel, I hear the mindset you have, and you seem to very much be one who's in control of the transition. While you're moving from a comfort zone to try to find a new comfort zone, there's a bit of uncomfort, and maybe a uncomfort adaptation as well once you reach that career point, which is natural. Has the Lieutenant Colonel Adam Blanton always found, through his military career and other life experiences, this trait to be natural for him? Or is this something you've built through your leadership development, your personal development?
That's a hard one, like the being comfortable, being uncomfortable type of thing. I don't know if that's a leadership trait I necessarily had. I knew growing up, especially in high school, I wanted to be a part of an organization that had a bigger purpose. It's really weird when folks looked at me because of the things I did in high school. No one would have pegged me to go into the military or into the government or something along those lines. But I felt that in my own development, I went to public school that's provided by the government, the taxpayers. I felt I got a good education, state school for college. It's obviously got government benefits coming into it to make that happen. I'm like, how do I pay back and pay it forward in a certain way with service? And I always felt like I wanted to do that. And because I grew up in a single family household, and I would say for the most part raised by females, you know, I had father figures in my life, but my dad wasn't as present. And I've noticed this a lot with some Marines, is that we end up trying to find the most difficult thing we can do in our lives to prove ourselves. And that's the Marines. That's what the commercials showed me. You have to fight a lava monster. I think that was the commercial at the time. I knew I wanted to challenge myself. And I definitely found that challenge in going into the Marine Corps. And you did have to find a lot of those things about getting comfortable being uncomfortable, and what you did do. And it does get developed over time. And I think the bigger challenge for me is not me being uncomfortable. It's interesting. It's like trying to teach my children how to do that as well, just because I've been blessed. It's like I'm coming from a single parent household with not a lot of money and everything else. I wouldn't say dirt poor, but pretty poor, to where I'm doing better than what my family had at the time. My kids' level of their understanding of things in terms of what's expected is a little bit different. And so trying to get them to be grateful and understand gratitude, and to understand that it's okay to be uncomfortable and to accept it and deal with it, and it's going to make them stronger. These are hard lessons to try to teach to an 8-year-old. And it's sometimes hard to teach to adults, but there's probably a little bit, to get back to your question, there's probably a little bit that was in me. But being put in the situations I was, whether in training or in combat, you're forced into that. And then once you've done that, you've crossed that hurdle and you've gone across the Rubicon, then you get used to knowing you can do that again. So it's not as big of a deal.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. And what I hear in your voice and your passion is, while you're working with your 8-year-old or your children in that aspect, it's also helping you learn and teach self, so to speak, in that regard. And perhaps they're teaching you.
Oh, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of, you can't talk to them in the way that you talk to everybody else, right? And so me and my wife have a number of different discussions about language, and not in terms of like foul language, but the order of your words in which they come out in order to have the appropriate effect on the audience, whether it's the 8-year-old or the 11-year-old, knowing they're individual people that have their own personalities and things affect them differently. My daughter's very much a type that, like, if you say you're disappointed in her or something, she might break down in tears. My son, if I say that, he might say, I really don't care. Like, they're on their own paths for stuff. And that's fine, but that means I've got to continue to remain flexible. And I have to take that to, even when I'm interacting with you or Scott or other people in the foundation, or as I interact with business leaders and trying to understand, like, what are their tics and how do I need to approach them and talk to them so that I'm relatable and I can get my ask across, or whatever my point is. It's useful. So my kids are teaching me, and it's making me do a lot more introspective work on how to just be a better human with them. It's a challenge, because I want to make sure that when they enter the world, they're good humans too, and not spoiled brats and all these other things that you see out of there. I don't want them to be lumped into the same pile that you see with some of the younger generations of folks that don't want to work or don't have the right attitudes, and they're trying to teach all of that stuff to them. So even they might be grouped into that generation, their own personal actions will set them apart.
God bless you for what you're doing as a parent. And as I get to know you and I hear and I learn from you, I don't think you have to have any worries about that. You and your wife are obviously doing a good job in that aspect. And Lieutenant Colonel, what a great 20 minutes we've had. And I'm so excited for the people getting a chance to listen and view this episode, and excited about the chance and your willingness to stick around for the next episode. And just as we segue out, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and for everyone here, for your service and for your family sacrifice. And God bless you. What a great representative you are of our military, of our country, but just individuals in that wake of life, period of life of making transition, whether it's from the military out to civilian world, or vice versa, or civilian industry to civilian industry. Sometimes it can be very overwhelming. And I think you represent a great path that models the still leadership piece. And I want to get into that with you more in our next episode. But God bless you again, and thank you for your service. Thank you for your time and your words that you're sharing today.
Oh, thank you, Kevin. It's been great so far. I didn't realize 20 minutes could go by so fast.
It doesn't take long, right, in this piece. It's so interesting. And what you're sharing, there's so much value there. I know everyone involved appreciates that and is taking something away. And again, for those of you out there watching or listening, we've got Adam Blanton, Lieutenant Colonel Blanton, back again next week. We appreciate you so much joining us. And again, what a vast amount of knowledge and share that we're getting from an individual right in the midst of a significant transition in his life. We're going to learn and hear more from Lieutenant Colonel Blanton in next week's episode. Thank you for what you do in leadership. Thank you for what you do in serving. I'm Kevin Smith for Lieutenant Colonel Blanton. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great day.